Okay, so right now, the world is pouring a staggering $2 trillion into a massive green energy boom. But here's the crazy part. This incredible push for a greener future is also setting us up for a huge commodity collapse. We're talking about something that could lead to blackouts as soon as 2026. So, you gotta ask, right? Are we actually witnessing a true energy revolution, or are we just ignoring the very same unintended consequences that have absolutely crippled economies in the past? All right, let's get into it. So get this, by 2025, copper prices are expected to hit a record-breaking $12,000 per metric ton. Now, you might think that's a sign of a booming market, right? Well, what if I told you it isn't a sign of strength at all? It's a symptom of a much, much deeper problem, a critical vulnerability in our entire global system. And here's the thing that's really wild. This whole situation unfolding with copper, it's not new at all. What you're really seeing is a predictable, recurring pattern that has triggered everything from famines and recessions to the fall of empires throughout history. And once you see this pattern, the coming shortage feels, well, almost inevitable. Okay, and this is the absolute key to understanding what's going on. The pattern plays out in four clear stages. First, you have the setup, where a society gets massively dependent on one single thing. Second, there's expansion and debasement. This is where demand gets artificially pumped up with things like subsidies, while the actual real-world supply gets ignored. Third, the crisis of confidence. This is when reality bites back and the moth just doesn't work anymore. And finally, stage 4, the reset, where the old system completely breaks down. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Is this just some theory? Absolutely not. Let's look at the proof. We're going to apply this exact pattern to 3 of the biggest energy crises in modern history: coal, oil, and uranium. You'll see just how perfectly the cycle repeats itself. Let's rewind the clock to 19th century Britain. Stage 1, the setup. Britain was completely hooked on coal. It powered their entire industrial revolution. Stage 2, the expansion, was its massive debt-fueled empire that covered a quarter of the globe, all of it built on the promise that its coal supply was endless, a promise it could never realistically keep. All right, now let's jump forward to a big one, the 1973 oil crisis. The setup? The whole world was getting addicted to cheap oil from the Middle East. The expansion? The huge post-war economic boom built on that cheap energy. And then, bam, 1973 hits. Stage 3, the crisis of confidence, explodes onto the scene. The OPEC oil embargo sends prices through the roof, quadrupling them almost overnight. That triggered stage 4, the reset, which completely shattered the global financial system and plunged the world into a deep, painful recession. And the fallout from this? It was absolutely massive. As energy expert Jason Bordoff puts it, this crisis totally reset geopolitics. You see, shortages don't just raise prices. They start recessions, and they completely realign global power. They force a whole new world order to emerge from the chaos. And believe it or not, we saw this exact same pattern play out with uranium back in the 2000s. A new interest in nuclear energy created a buying frenzy. And check out these numbers. The price skyrocketed, and I mean skyrocketed. 19-fold, from just $7 a pound to over 136. And then, just 2 years later, it crashed by 70%. That is the pattern's destructive cycle in its purest form. A boom, a bust, and a reset where a whole lot of wealth changes hands. Okay, so we've seen the pattern in history, right? Coal, oil, uranium, it's undeniable. Now let's bring it to today and apply the same 4-stage pattern to the copper market. Because this isn't some hypothetical threat. This is happening right now, in real time. So here we are, stage 1, the setup, happening right before our eyes. On one hand, you've got this absolute explosion in demand for copper. I mean, think about it. It's the lifeblood of electrification. You need it for EVs, for wind turbines, for the data centers running our world. But on the other hand, the supply side is starting to crack. Global mine output has basically flatlined thanks to lower quality ore, insane 15-year delays to get a new mine approved, and growing political risks. And that brings us right to stage 2, expansion and debasement. Right now, governments are pumping more than $1 trillion a year in subsidies into clean energy. This is artificially inflating copper demand like crazy. It creates this dangerous illusion that there's plenty to go around, but it completely ignores the hard geological truth. We're stuck pulling only about 22 million tons out of the ground each year. And this, right here, is the simple, terrifying math at the heart of the problem. While we're stuck at 22 million tons of supply, demand is on track to blow past 32 million tons by 2030. That leaves us with a gaping hole, a 10 million ton supply gap. This isn't just a guess. It's an unforgiving equation that makes a future crisis look all but guaranteed. But this goes way beyond just supply and demand. This is about geopolitics. It's about a world divided, and it reveals a critical imbalance between China's grip on the market and the West's dangerous dependency. Just look at these numbers. They tell the whole story. China controls a whopping 60% of the world's copper refining. Meanwhile, the US and the EU, they each have less than 5%. This makes them incredibly dependent on imports. We're talking 85% for the US and a staggering 95% for the EU. And this chart really drives the point home. It's a strategic choke point. Having one country with so much control over the refining process gives them incredible leverage over the entire world's prices and supply. It's just like OPEC's control over oil back in the 70s. This is a powder keg just waiting for a match. So what does this mean for the economy? Well, the fallout could be brutal. A 10 million ton supply gap could wipe out $1 trillion from global GDP. That would come from skyrocketing energy prices, stalled infrastructure projects, and green investments that go nowhere. And look, this isn't some abstract economic problem. This is going to hit you, me, everyone, right at home. We're talking about higher electricity bills that squeeze family budgets, job losses in manufacturing, and a rise in energy poverty that hits the most vulnerable people the hardest. Okay, so that's the problem. It sounds pretty grim, right? But here's the good news. This pattern doesn't have to end in disaster. If we recognize what's happening in time, we can navigate the reset. So let's shift gears and talk about real actionable solutions, both on a huge scale and for you personally. So on a huge systemic level, governments have got to get their act together. We have to streamline the absurd 15-year process for approving new mines down to something reasonable, like 5 years. We absolutely must double copper recycling rates, and we've got to invest in new tech that helps us use less copper in the first place. So what about for the rest of us? For you? Well, there are absolutely ways to prepare yourself. You could consider putting a part of your portfolio in hard assets like copper ETFs. It might be wise to diversify into other crucial commodities like silver and nickel. And on a super practical level, you can invest in your own energy security with things like home solar. The legendary investor Charlie Munger really nailed it when he said, "Show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome." The incentives we have right now, pushing demand without fixing supply, are pointing directly to an outcome of shortage. So the smart move is to create your own incentives for your own resilience. So at the end of the day, what's the biggest takeaway here? It's that understanding this historical pattern is our most powerful weapon. It isn't destiny. It's a warning. It's a warning written in the math of history. And just by recognizing it, we actually have a chance to break the cycle and avoid the worst of what's coming. So make no mistake about it, a reset is coming. The only real question left is, will you be ready?